Hello, good morning. How you doing? It's Phil Thatch, and I am here this morning at Middle Creek. And I've photographed this area, I don't know, this may be my 10th time or more that I've come to this area to make photographs. We had a lot of rain yesterday, so it looks like the creek's flowing good. And I just haven't done a waterfall shot in a long time, but I didn't have time to drive a long way to a waterfall. I can get to this one in less than an hour, probably not much more than 30 minutes. So this is the one I decided to come to. The hike's not very long, but it is very difficult. The beginning of the hike, which I'm on now, is easy, but it gets a lot more difficult before you get to the waterfall. But anyway, I'm excited to be here, and I'll be using a brand new used lens today. I'm finally starting to round out my native Z lens collection, and I bought a 24-120 from a friend of mine who I've never met, Matthew Rafeman, all the way in California. Took forever to ship this thing, but that's not his fault or my fault. It's a long way from California to Tennessee when you're shipping post office ground. But anyway, the lens has finally arrived, and I'm going to see if I can get some shots. Wow, this section of the creek right here, which I often photograph, is looking really good this morning. It's actually not even sunrise yet. Sunrise is probably 5 or 10 minutes away. But I think I might try to work out a composition of this little area of the creek before I go on to the proper waterfall, which is actually not, it's called Middle Creek Falls, but it's actually a tributary of Middle Creek spilling into Middle Creek. But I'm going to shoot this little section of the creek right here, I think. Let me get set up. It's 35 degrees, and it's going to do nothing today but get colder and colder. It's the warmest right now at sunrise, 35 degrees, and it's going to get down into the teens Fahrenheit by tonight. And I forgot my glasses, but as you can see, I have my glasses, so I just left my camera right here. There's no other way to get here than the trailhead. I left my camera and my camera back here and scampered back to the car and got my glasses so I could see what in the world I was doing. And I made a few shots here. By the way, the lens that I've been talking about is the 24-120 continuous f4 Z-mount lens. No stabilization in it, but you don't need it because there's stabilization in the camera. Plus, I'm going to use this lens mostly on a tripod anyway. But I've made shots of this scene kind of taking advantage of the entire focal range of the lens. I made a wide shot at 24, getting the whole scene. My favorite part is some little fingers. Some people call them fingers when the water goes over a rock and it looks like fingers. I made a shot of that at 120 millimeters, and then I made a shot in between 24 and 120 of some of the scene. So really trying to take advantage of the range of this 24-120 lens. This is the 24 millimeter shot of the creek. I had the camera angled down so I could get this area that was pretty much right in front of me and this area up here. My favorite part of this little section of the creek is this spot right here, this finger spot. And this is 2 seconds. This is a 2-second exposure, and I really probably should have bumped the ISO a little bit so I could get it a little bit faster. It's a little too cotton candy-like in this area right here, but I was tired from running back to get my glasses, and I didn't think of that. So this is the 24 millimeter shot. And then I made another shot of the same scene, but this is 75 millimeters, and it's concentrating more on my favorite part of the shot. This one, the exposure came out correct at 0.8 of a second, so that's about right. I really like a half a second, but 0.8 of a second looks pretty good. I like the colors in this, and this is also ISO 64, and all of these shots so far are f8. And now this is the 120 millimeter image of the same area, just so I could say I used the full length of the lens. And this is also 0.8 of a second f8 and ISO 64, and this concentrates mostly on my favorite section of this area. So there you have it. Lots better shots coming later, but I did enjoy making these as well. I thought I would come over to the finger area and get a really up close shot of it, but the water's just too deep. I couldn't make it there even in my favorite boots. I left that first little area where I made several shots and a couple of video clips, and I'm making my way to Middle Creek Falls now. And I always like this spot along the trail. It's not really a trail. It's a trail up until about that first spot that I showed you before, and then it just kind of becomes a rock scramble. And one of the things I like about this little area right here is this tree that kind of grows up and its trunk goes in all sorts of different directions. That's really cool. And of course, from up here, I'm way above the creek now, though hopefully you can see the creek down there. So that's neat. And then look at this behind me. This huge boulder. It's as big as a house. And it's just kind of balanced up on some other boulders just sitting there. And this little area it's only 10 minutes from downtown Chattanooga. So a lot of people come here, and you can see sometimes it looks like they may build campfires and stuff right here. But anyway, this is a neat place on the trail that's not really a trail to get to Middle Creek Falls. So now I have to figure out how to get through this mess right here. And I can already see the Triple Falls. It's flowing pretty good, but I can't make a shot from here. So the hardest part is yet to come. I made it to the falls, or not to the falls, but close enough to the falls to get a shot. There's one part of the trail where there's a tree laying across the trail, and the tree's too high for me to climb over, because it's, oh, you know, I could climb over it if it was flat, but it's a steep, you know, the hill is steep that the tree is laying down, and I couldn't get under it with my camera bag backpack on, so I had to take my backpack off, slide it under the tree, and then I could go under the tree, put the backpack back on. Anyway, I made it, and this is the spot that I often shoot from, right here on this boulder. And a lot of times I'll go down to the very end of the boulder and shoot, but today I've decided to work from up here at the top of the boulder, right by this other boulder. This place has a lot of boulders. But anyway, there it is, the beautiful Triple Falls, Middle Creek Falls, which is not even Middle Creek, but it falls into Middle Creek. And I've used the 24 to 120. I'm shooting all my shots today at f8. You know, a lot of landscape photographers will do f11 or f16 even, and that does give you more depth of field. But if you look at the performance of lenses, they're usually at their sharpest at 5.6 or 8. So if I'm shooting something without a foreground interest, I'll use f8 because it just makes for a sharper shot. But anyway, my focal length has been somewhere between 35 and 50, and I haven't used any filters today. It's dark enough to where I can get a shutter speed of about a half a second, give or take, which in my opinion is really good for waterfall photography. I think some of my earlier shots, I was almost to 2 seconds when I was down the creek shooting those earlier shots, but a half a second is kind of what I like best for waterfalls. And it's 100% overcast, so there's really no glare, or not much of a glare on these rocks, and if I get a polarizer on it, it might take some of the depth out of the shot. So no filters whatsoever, a half a second, and here's a few shots of beautiful Middle Creek Falls. So there it is, the Triple Falls, Middle Creek Falls. This is the allure of this area, and I've photographed this same falls from this same spot many times with many different cameras, and I do like the way this shot came out. This is 40 millimeters, 0.6 of a second for this one, f8 and ISO 64 of the beautiful Triple Falls known as Middle Creek Falls. I noticed while I was downstream making a picture of Middle Creek Falls that upriver of Middle Creek Falls has some stuff that looked pretty cool, so I figured out how to scramble my way here. And I was really wanting to shoot that over there, but when I got here, I found this, which is a little stream or brook or something flowing into Middle Creek from the other side, the side that the rock scramble trail is on, not the side that Middle Creek falls in. I've never made this shot before. I've been here many, many times. This is the first time I've ever made this shot. 24 millimeters is not wide enough So I switched to my little Viltrox lens. I love this lens. This is my ultra wide for the Z system. It's a 16mm 1.8, and I put this shot on, or lens on, framed up a composition. And I know just a minute ago I said I'm trying to shoot at f8. Well, this I need more depth of field. So I'm shooting this shot here of whatever the hell this waterfall is called with the Viltrox at f11. I can't believe I've never found and photographed this spot before as many times as I've visited this area, but it is quite a bit more climbing to get here, so maybe that explains it. And a lot of times when I come here, it doesn't appear to be flowing in this area. So really glad I found it this time. This is the Viltrox 16mm. I've got it stopped down to f11, and I want this to be in focus and all the way back here to be in focus. So I needed to stop it down a little bit more than f8 to get more depth of field. So, and this is a half a second and ISO 64. Now I made this shot from on top of the rock, and this shot I made down beside the rock. You can see the rock right here on the right hand side of the frame. This is where I was standing and the tripod was for that first shot. And this lower angle shot concentrates more on this tree as kind of the foreground interest, and the previous shot kind of concentrates more on this shelf here as the foreground interest. As you can see, the shelf, we are below that shelf now in this shot. And I like both of these. I asked Heather which one she liked the best, and she told me she liked this one the best. So this is the one I put on social media. But I like both of these quite a bit. I love the colors in this. You got warm tones and cool tones in this. And this one is 0.6 of a second f11 ISO 64. This one was a half a second f11 ISO 64. Really happy with both of these shots of a new area of Middle Creek to photograph. So that last shot I made was done on the other side of this boulder. I don't know if you can see where I was before, but now I'm over here, and this gives me a whole different look at what's called Middle Creek Falls, the little triple falls. And I don't think I've ever shot it from over here. So I decided that I would, and it's getting brighter as the sun is coming up, so I've had to put on my Maven 3-stop neutral density filter, but that made it a little bit too dark. I could have done a real long shutter speed, but I decided to stick at 1/2 a second and just bump my ISO up from 64 to 200. So we'll see how that comes out. So this is the shot looking downstream at Middle Creek Falls from the other direction than I normally shoot it from. And on this one, I had the Maven 3-stop neutral density filter on, and it was too bright to shoot at a half a second without the neutral density filter on. And with the 3-stop on, I needed to shoot for 2 seconds, which is longer than I like. So what I did was I bumped the ISO up to 200 from 64, and that put my exposure right back at a half a second where I like it. Now I did shoot this shot also for 2 seconds just to see, but I preferred the half a second shot at 200 ISO. And there it is, Middle Creek Falls from the other direction. This is the first time I've ever shot it from this angle after all the times I've been there. I used a 36mm focal length for this shot with the 24 to 120. And I'm back at f8 for this shot because there's not a foreground interest, and f8 can get everything in focus when nothing is very close, while I also need to get things in focus at a distance. So the thing that really made me want to come down the trail further was this right here. A lot of times this is flowing just a trickle, even when Middle Creek Falls, the little triple falls, is flowing pretty good. But today, this is its own waterfall. So I said, I want to get a picture of that. So that's why I came down here. And then I found a couple of shots I've never shot before. But I'd like to shoot it from the top of this boulder. I just can't get on top of it. I mean, I could probably get up there, but it's a pretty risky thing. I feel like I would probably either hurt myself or my gear or both. So that's part of being 58 years old. I decided not to try that. Although I have tried a lot of risky stuff to get here. Believe it or not, this little boulder is what's holding me back. So I decided to try to shoot it from here, and the angle's not as good, but it's okay And I shot it from here, and then I said, you know what, I could get in this water down here, but this water is flowing really hard. So I set my tripod in there, and I've been doing kind of an ISO 64 shot for 2 seconds and an ISO 200 shot for a half a second of a couple of these compositions that I probably already told you about. And I did just a half a second shot here, and when I looked at it on the back of the screen, the current flowing past the tripod looked like it made it a little blurry. So I did it again, did my 2 second timer, and I pushed down on the tripod while the 2 second timer was going and the half a second shot. And I think I've got a sharp shot of this waterfall. It's nowhere near as pretty as Middle Creek Falls, but I wanted to get it while I was here. This is a really cool play, especially as close to downtown Chattanooga as it is. This shot's also at f8 and 1/2 second ISO 200 of this other section of Middle Creek Falls, or an area just down from the Middle Creek Triple Falls. I've never photographed it like this before. This is definitely the first time. And the technique of pushing down on the tripod while it was in the water with the water rushing past it did get the motion blur out of the shot. The previous shot where I didn't push down on it, you could definitely see that this log hanging off the waterfall was not as sharp as this shot. So I'm glad I made another shot and pushed down on the tripod. This one is 1/2 second f8 ISO 200 and 31 millimeters. I've made it back to the easy part of the trail. Man, that never gets easier. That hard part of the trail, which isn't really a trail, never gets easier. One day I'm going to set the camera down and film myself going through all the hard spots, but I don't know, maybe I need a second person to do that, because I just can't see going through the hard spot, setting up my camera, climbing back through the hard spot, then climbing back through the hard spot again to get my camera. It's hard enough just to go through the hard spot that one time. So I guess I won't have any documentation of the hard part of this trail anytime soon, unless somebody wants to come hiking with me and operate the video camera during the hike. But anyway, it was a lot of fun today. I'm just thrilled to have found a new shot in this place that I've been so many times. Actually 2 new shots if you count maybe even 3 shots that I've never made before. So that's pretty cool, and I'm happy with my 24-120 that I bought from Matthew. And I promised you that I would be using the Viltrox 16mm 1.8 more often, and today that promise came true, because there was a shot that I needed wider than 24 millimeters, and I was glad to have that lens with me. I may also get the Nikon 20mm 1.8, so I'll have 2 different ultra wides. I just don't want to get the 14-30. I'm in love with my 77mm filters that fit everything. They fit my new 100-400, which I haven't used yet on the channel. They fit my 24-120. They fit a lot of my landscape photography Canon gear. So I just don't want to get that 14-30 and then have to get a whole set of 82mm filters and have to use adapters on everything else in my kit. I'd rather just use this Viltrox, which does perfectly well, and maybe that 20mm 1.8, which also has a 77mm filter thread. I'd rather go that route. But anyway, I've babbled on long enough. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, take a second, reach down, hit the thumbs up button. If you want to see some more stuff like this, subscribe and hit the bell. And as always, I hope to see you in my next video. Have a great day. Bye-bye from the easy part of the trail, Middle Creek.